concept of enlightenment means something different to everyone. To some it refers to the explosion of ideas and reason in the late 17th century. To others it's a state of mind that reveals plain the secrets of the universe and everything in it. Whatever your definition of enlightenment, one thing is clear. It is normally pretty difficult to get to. Spending months meditating under a tree until you almost starved to death, or even experiencing first-hand scientific revelations which were previously unthinkable. They're a little much to ask of your average spiritual seeker. Well, what if I told you it was a lot easier than all that? Yes indeed, with just this CD-ROM, you too can achieve epiphany in a single day. Sign up now and you'll get yourself a free toaster. So, this here is Endorfun, your ticket to heaven on earth in a big box. Or something. The blurb defines endorphin as a non-chemical stimulation of the mind, inducing immense feeling of joy, happiness and a higher level of consciousness. That's a bold statement if ever there was one. This is what happens when you let just anyone slap the code onto a CD, and in this case, Just Anyone is One Song Partners Incorporated. According to this Wired article from 1995, the group is a coalition of artists and musicians dedicated to creating games and music that provide positive, life-affirming experiences. Not a bad cause, honestly, although the rest of this piece reads more of a native advert than anything. The press coverage didn't stop there. Time Warner Interactive, the publishers of the game, really wanted Endorfun in the minds of the general public. Billboard published a lengthy piece on the game, explaining its origins and how its music plays a vital role in the whole experience. It also found its way into a bunch of New Age journals because, well, that's something we'll get onto. One thing I do notice is that a lot of these publications compare it directly to Tetris, yet more bold claims. There's a lot of full of it. Inside the big box you get not a whole lot really. This is the mid-90s after all. Big boxes were getting a little spacious. There's a surprisingly thick manual in several different languages, a single CD-ROM containing the game for both PC and Mac, and a compliment slip showing Time Warner's exceedingly ugly logo. What a bizarre thing. The game runs straight off the CD, and while you can install it onto your hard drive, you still need the disc in for that aforementioned soundtrack. From the main menu, you get the choice of starting a new game, or just jumping straight into the first... episode? Sure, let's go with that. So here's that 100% natural high that we're talking about. The object is to move the light body, onto the squares, the life force, such that the top face matches the colour of the square beneath. Rinse and repeat until you either hit the life force quota, or run out of time. As a puzzle game concept, this isn't too bad, and manoeuvring your cube to catch those dastardly squares can be fun at times. The responsive controls help, although sometimes they can feel a little bit twitchy. It's not really anything like Tetris at all, outside of the fact that there are squares. I'd be more inclined to compare it to Clax, if only for the fact that both games are 90s as you can get. Anyway, this beginner stage is very boring, and only serves to get you acquainted with how Endorfun works. Fortunately, there are a whole boatload of episodes, erroneously referred to as games, each with different soundtracks and quirks to the gameplay. Mostly this just means you'll be rolling around a grid which slowly fills up with squares, so the challenge comes not only from having to have your cube in the exact right orientation, but having enough space to orientate it in the first place. Occasionally you'll come across a level like Slow, which is, well, slow. And the slowness is achieved by forcibly lowering the frame rate, meaning those responsive controls are now entirely unresponsive. The main difference between each episode is the music. Each one has a different soundtrack, and it's a pretty darn unique one at that. I perhaps wouldn't choose to listen to it, but it's not often you get a game with this sort of jazz world fusion music. Some levels even have these subliminal messages embedded in the music.
I create miracles.
I have the power. I feel the magic of the universe.
I create miracles.
I have the power.
It's not exactly subtle, is it? I guess these platitudes are meant to make you feel good, reinforced by the back of the box, and indeed by Endorfun's whole marketing. But this contrasts massively with the game itself, which at times can get downright stressful. You see, trying to collect these life force blocks can be a real pain in the butt. If your cube isn't in quite the right position, you've got to do this whole song and dance to try and force it in place. It's a real round peg square hole situation, and it feels clumsy. Nothing worse than approaching a square thinking you got the right angle of attack, only to come to a dead stop right in front of it. Especially bothersome is when the table fills up so much that you literally can't do anything except wait for the timer to tick down. And am I supposed to feel relaxed with this? Something I should mention is the aesthetic. The actual game area is pretty basic, but the backgrounds range from loud to kaleidoscopic. On some backgrounds you can't actually see certain colours. Despite outward appearances, there is actually a blue tile in this shot. And if this is a big problem for someone with good eyesight, those with visual impairments have got no chance. So much for inclusivity. Beyond that, there really isn't a whole lot to talk about. What you're seeing here is all the game has to offer. And they have the guts to compare themselves to Tetris, one of the biggest puzzle games of all time. Here's the thing, this would probably be alright if it was played straight. Give us a puzzle game, don't try and make it more than it is, and definitely don't sell it as some profoundly spiritual experience. Now, when researching Endorfun, I came across this other game called CuOnPa. What a strange title. Apparently the developers licensed Endorfun, which is confirmed by the intro screen. Let's have a go and see what it's all about.
Ready, go!
My prayers have been answered. It's effectively the same game. You get a cube, you get the squares, and you get the awkward obstacles too. I feel like this is how it should have been from the start. There are also a few more visual effects at play. For example, there's a bit more fanfare about the act of climbing a square, which makes the game infinitely more satisfying to play. And the controls feel even better, lacking that twitchiness that the original had, while still remaining super fluid. It doesn't seem that there are as many levels in this game, but on the other hand you get two new game modes, Puzzle and Survival. Survival is what it says on the tin. You have to keep going for as long as possible before the board eventually fills up. Puzzle is kind of the opposite. You're given a board with a specific set of squares to squash, and a limited number of moves to do it in. These tend to be kind of easy though, taking only 2 or 3 tries at most. On top of that, you get to play all these modes with a reduced set of colours, making the whole experience a lot more enjoyable, and a lot easier. I'm not massively impressed with the music though. It's the one thing they could have done with keeping from Endorfun. That soundtrack was the best bit. But what's that? You don't have a PlayStation? Well, if you were still rocking your Super Famicom, you could play it on there too. That is if you were willing to wait over a year, as this version wasn't published until as late as December 1996. It's exactly the same pretty much, just that the graphics aren't quite as nice, and the low frame rate means the controls aren't as responsive, and the music somehow sounds very last gen. Otherwise it's perfectly serviceable. You get the same levels as on the PlayStation barring the survival mode, and you get the 3 colour option too. One more thing, I couldn't get past this board for love nor money. And that is Endorfun. It's a perfectly fine little puzzle game that can be a bit awkward at times, but can also be quite entertaining. It's also a spiritual awakening on a CD-ROM, so if that's your bag, Endorfun is the game for you. Otherwise, maybe give CuOnPa a look. Or maybe just play Clax instead.